Welcome to Everything Business Consulting, a podcast dedicated to business consulting success. It's for people who are already a business consultant and want to improve their skills, are an accountant and want to offer consulting services to their clients, are an ex-corporate who wants to get out of the rat race and become a self-employed business consultant, or you've owned a business before and now want to use the skills that you've learned to help others in business. I'm David Thexton.
And I'm Julius Bloom.
Everything Business Consulting is brought to you by ConsultX, a global business consulting community that gives you everything you require to take control of your lifestyle and income by becoming a successful business consultant. ConsultX guides you through the entire process of building and running your own consulting business with a complete online academy, a system to acquire clients, a framework and software to provide them with real results, and an international community of like-minded individuals. There is also a suite of resources and much more. To find out more about this opportunity, come and visit us at ConsultX.com.
Today we're going to talk about 7 ways to double your client's profit in the next 12 months. David, should we talk about how we can do this? How we can actually double someone's profit within 12 months? Because to me that sounds pretty ambitious.
Well, before I answer that question, I want to tell everybody that inside the head of a client is a big jumbled up mess of all of the problems and issues that they have. They tend to work on all of these problems at the same time, which is impossible for most of us. So clients tend to be in confusion most of the time and become unable to sort things out.
So David, what is the first of the 7 methods on how we are going to increase the profitability for your client?
Over the next 12 months. It's revenue. We started at the most simple one of all. If you can increase the revenue, and providing that revenue has a healthy gross profit attached to it, you will increase the profit.
Okay, and how are we going to increase this revenue?
Well, I suggest that we examine all the aspects around revenue, such as how to increase it, new products, maybe there's some new products that can be developed, new geographical areas where you can expand to other places, new customers or clients, depending on what you call them. Maybe loyalty programs where you can bonus the people, your customers or clients, for them to purchase more off you.
So to do some of these things, David, obviously you're going to have to do some more sales or marketing activities, but we're just looking at this as from a more overall point of view.
Yeah.
Right, that we need to increase revenue. That's one of the ways.
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
and providing you're making the right amount of gross profit.
Yep, perfect. What's next?
Increasing prices is always a very simple one. I've had many clients myself where they haven't had a price increase for 5 years and things like that. Lowering discounts is the other side of that, of course, where you take the discounts down or don't offer them at all. Another good way is to bonus the salespeople based on their actual increase in sales.
And that helps encourages them basically to sell more.
Yes, of course, that's right, yeah. Exporting is good because it's like that's the equivalent of new areas really, but going offshore. Overseas somewhere. In the case of supermarkets and big box stores, department stores and things like that, you could produce house brands or contract packing. It's roughly the same thing. So you could be, it might be Walmart's, for example. You might be producing potato chips, and you might be able to do a brand of potato chips for Walmart's, which would be significant, I would say. And the modern day version of increasing sales is to get a website, a website that transacts business and sell through the internet.
Yep, anything to increase revenue. We've seen with COVID that a lot of online sales have gone absolutely through the roof, up 100, 200 even 300-400% in some cases.
Yeah, and you've seen restaurants making up meals and getting them delivered via Uber and things like that.
Yep, absolutely.
So sky's the limit.
Get
revenue.
Revenue up. Okay, I will take over the next one. So David, the next part of increasing our profit for over the 12 months, over the first 12 months you're working with a client, would be to reduce the cost of goods sold. This is an area that can be a mini gold mine for saving money and basically put it back into the client's bottom line. So some ideas to do this would be to lower the price of the cost of goods sold. So how you're thinking, how might you do that? You could arrange a table contract with suppliers. David, what's a table contract?
Well, it's where you go to a supplier and you pledge loyalty to them for a period of time, let's say 12 months. Mm-hmm. Let's say you own a bed shop and you're buying mattresses. You go to the mattress supplier and you say, I'll buy 1,000 mattresses off you over the next 12 months, but I want to negotiate a volume discount on this. Mm-hmm. So they get the loyalty, you get 10% discount on every mattress that you buy, and you factor that into an agreement. It's typically called a table contract. Now that's better than buying them every single month and paying the full price for them.
Absolutely. Any discount is going to, as you say, it's going to be a small gold mine, and it's going to add to your bottom line of the business. The next point we have in reducing costs of goods is to pay cash for goods up front in order to get a discount. Now, David, you've got a really good example where you did something in a business that you were running to get a cash discount. You factored your invoices. Can you tell us about that? What happened and how you were able to pay a small percentage to get a large percentage?
Yes, well, we used to factor our invoices, the company that I owned, and what that does, just if you're not familiar with that term, you take your invoices and a form of a finance company buys your invoices off you, and then when your customer pays, the money goes back to the factoring company. It's called off invoice discounting, it's called factoring, it's called something else too, I can't remember. Anyway, so we had all this cash. We always had this big pile of cash in the bank.
How much does that cost? What sort of cut do they take?
Well, they charged us 2% per invoice. So I went to suppliers and I negotiated 8 to 10% discount by paying them cash. Now these suppliers were desperate for cash. So they gave me 10% and I paid 2% for it. Cut a long story short, and I made 8% on top of that. That's what I did there.
It's very healthy to do something like that. So that's another idea to have in your toolkit. Now the next idea in reducing costs of goods sold is to get quotes from other suppliers and obviously shop around. Like a lot of places, you can get them to be competitive, especially if they might be new in business or you might be a new client to them and they really want to get you on board. And then in the same vein, a lot of companies want to keep you as a client because we're in a very competitive sort of environment at the moment where there is a lot of kind of external circumstances going on with the virus and that sort of thing, and so every client that someone has, every customer is very valuable, so people are willing to sharpen their prices in order to keep things. So shop around and get quotes from other suppliers. The next point would be to organize a consignment system with suppliers. David, have you had any success with this in the past?
Yes, and it worked really, really well. This particular supplier, we were spending a lot of money with them, and I suggested to them that we put a cage in the warehouse and their products went into the cage, and it was their responsibility to make sure that we had a min and a max. Whenever it got down to a minimum, the company would ship in enough product or raw materials to go up to the max, and it was their responsibility. So what we had a mini warehouse of theirs inside our warehouse. Now that meant at the end of the month the rep would call and would count up all of the stock, and we would be billed for what we used during the month, and that meant at the end of the month we had no raw materials left, because we had been they owned it. So the raw materials did not belong to us until we used them in our factory.
So you weren't paying any cash, anything out of, no, it was nothing out of cash flow basically to be able to do that.
No, because you need cash flow to be able to have raw material on hand.
Yep, absolutely. And another option to do that, and this is only going to work in some types of businesses, is to get the supplier to invoice you only once the goods are used, and that's very, very similar, isn't it?
Well, that's very similar to what we're talking about on a consignment system. Is that you only get invoiced for what you've used. Yeah.
And another way, which is probably a little bit more modern and more so for an online business, is to drop ship, and that's where you don't even hold the stock. You basically just sell it, and once it's been purchased, then you get the supplier to dispatch it directly to the customer or to the client. So that's another option that you could do with a business that's capable to do that. David, what's our next way to increase our profit within 12 months?
Well, wastage, if you're a manufacturer, if you're just a wholesaler or a retailer, there shouldn't be any wastage at all. But if you're manufacturing, there's going to be wastage, and there's potentially huge savings if you focus on that. So you could look at production wastage, and the thing is, can the wastage that the factory is producing it or causing it, can that be sold? Paper, cardboard, metal, all sorts of things. Can it be sold to somebody, and can some money be recovered out of it? Another is, can we lower machine wastage on the machine? Or if you've got machines, obviously, if that's what's happening, because if a group of employees focuses on lowering waste, then their attention is drawn to that, and if you start measuring it, then if you can measure it, you can manage it. You've heard that a few times before. Then get everybody working on it and publish the results on some form of a graph or reporting mechanism in the lunchroom or something. The other thing is, can the waste be recycled by the supplier? We used to buy a lot of plastic bottles, and there'd be something like about maybe a 3 to 4% wastage of the plastic bottles. We would save them up, give them back to the supplier, and they grind them up again and make them into bottles again. So that worked very well. And can the supplier take cost out of the raw material? Quite often, you'll find that your client has got is buying raw materials. I'm thinking of anything: cardboard, paper, glass, plastic, whatever, metal products. Can the supplier take cost out of the raw material and lower the cost of goods, which flicks back onto the other one, the cost of goods sold?
Another thing to think about with wastage is to basically factor wastage into the price of the product or the service you're offering. You know that if you're offering a service, you're probably going to have some period of downtime, so you might want to add that onto the hourly charge or the fee that you're charging for the service. Or if you're producing something, factor that in as well, so you can account for the wastage that might happen. Obviously you want to decrease it, but if you can be paid for it as well, that's fantastic too.
Yep.
Now the next thing we have to look at is expenses, and reducing expenses is quite similar to cost of goods sold, but a little bit different as well. So they seem to grow by themselves, as employees like to spend money in businesses. When they grow, they get bigger and bigger, and there's more employees, and the expenses just go up and up. It's not their money, so they don't think and treat the money in the business like it is theirs, and they're not always as careful as what you might like them to be. So when you come in as a consultant and you're looking for things to do, often looking at expenses is a really, really good way to gain control of the profit of a business. Now the first thing that we recommend to do is to form a task force and tear every single expense of the business apart, and you'll find many areas in the business where there are lots of a few cents here and a few cents there being wasted. So you want to pick all of them up, and again, that's just going to put them all back onto the bottom line, and they add up very, very quickly. There are companies that actually do this. This is the only service they provide. They do it for a living. They go into a business and they look for expenses that can be saved, and they keep 50% of the savings they find for 12 months. Think about that. There's businesses, there's so much money out there in expenses that has been wasted basically. There's an entire industry of people that go into businesses, they find this money, they save the money, and they make an absolute fortune, obviously for the business, but for themselves as well. And as a consultant, if you can put that, another feather in your cap, and you can take that to business owners, you're going to look even better and be able to save this business more money and get them to make more profit. Remember, it's easy to spend and it's hard to earn. It's much easier to spend money in a business, and it's actually quite difficult, it can be difficult to make money. So it's easier to look for the savings and expenses rather than to go out and increase the size of the business and get more employees and increase sales to improve your profitability that way. If we can save some money, it's far easier, because a penny saved is a penny earned. What's next, David?
We're going to have a quick look at payroll, because that tends to be, in a lot of businesses, the biggest area of expense wastage, as the subject of employees and payroll seems to enter this quasi-psycho zone, as people are very sensitive to it. But having too many people could sink the ship, or bankrupt the business and lose everybody their jobs.
We don't want that.
Well, no. So a good idea is to do a job spec or an organisational chart with no names.
Okay.
Put it up on the wall with the management team and concentrate on the job descriptions and responsibilities rather than the people. And what'll happen is you'll find people who are doing nothing in the business and should be made redundant.
Oh, do you have an example?
Yeah, well, I consulted a business a few years ago, had something like 130 staff, and we did this exercise, and we found, I think it was 18 or 20 people who were doing nothing. It's incredible, and it's a trick. So you got the owner and the management team, and because they can't keep 120, 130 people in their head, and you write down, right, let's start at the top. We've got the CEO, and then we've got the sales manager, then we've got the warehouse manager, production, so on, all the way through, and we've got Bill who works on this machine, and Janice, and so on, and you get to and you add them all up, and you go, there's 101 people, why are we paying 120? And that saved something very close to $1 million in the payroll.
Well, if you divided that by the percentage, you're going to be saving a sixth of the expense of payroll, which is pretty significant in a large business.
It is, yeah.
Continuing on from payroll, you should look at contractors. So whilst you're looking at the payroll, you want to consider, are some of the positions able to be contracted out to contractors? Because you can save a pretty significant amount, 50% perhaps, of the value that you're paying out for people's jobs. Now, the world is changing, and I had a client whose PA worked for him on a circus train in Russia.
Isn't that amazing?
That's pretty phenomenal, and we are getting into a situation where it's just more and more accepted that you contract out to specialist people who can do a particular thing. They might, on the surface, look like they're going to be a bit more expensive, but they're so efficient and good at what they do and productive that they do end up saving you money in the long run.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for. So see if there's any opportunity to get outside people, contractors in, to do very specific jobs.
The next one we're looking at, number 7, is importing raw materials. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, but when in Rome, etc., do as the Romans do. And in many cases, the business's competition will be importing raw materials, and to keep competitive, your client may need to do this. The savings could be enormous. So get the team to work on this idea vigorously. And I'll give you a good example of this. I used to own a beverage company, and we used to buy New Zealand apple juice from down in Napier Hastings, and beautiful apple juice. And then the Chinese government, what they did was they thought, here's a good idea, and they had all this land that had nothing on it. So they cultivated it all and they planted 100 million apple trees. And then they allocated it out to certain families and all those sorts of things. So they started growing apples. And then the Chinese government put in apple processing plants where they juiced all these apples and turned them into apple juice concentrate. So here were we in New Zealand buying this beautiful apple juice from mid-North Island and paying something like about $4 a concentrate litre for it. And the Chinese representatives came in and they could sell it to us for $1 per concentrate litre. That's 25% of what they were paying. And I, being silly old David, I said, no, we're going to support New Zealand made. We're going to support New Zealand made. So we did for a number of months. And then our biggest opposition here in New Zealand, which funnily enough was the Apple and Pear Marketing Board, started buying Chinese apple. And they bankrupted their own apple industry in New Zealand to get that 25% cost price. I had to follow them. I had to buy Chinese. So the whole New Zealand apple juicing market was just about totally destroyed over that. I didn't want to do it, but like I'm saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I had to do it because it would have completely wiped us out.
Fantastic. So that was the 7 different areas where you can look to improve your clients' profitability. Just to recap, number 1 was to increase revenue. So this can be increasing sales price or increase sales volume.
Yep.
2, to reduce the cost of goods sold. That's the price behind everything that you're selling. If you can get that down, then that is going to be a small gold mine for you. 3, reduce wastage, or at least allocate some of that wastage to the cost of the sale. 4, decrease expenses. And if we should also mention that if your business is growing and you're increasing the sales volume or something like that, you're probably going to have an increase in expenses or payroll or something like that. But as a percentage or a proportion of it, you want to see it decreasing, don't you?
You do, yeah.
Fantastic. Then decrease payroll, number 5. Whilst you're at it, look at contractors. That's number 6. And finally, number 7 is see if you can import raw materials to really reduce that cost of sales again. Do you have any final words there, David?
Well, it's everywhere, Julius, and I've said a number of times that the job we do as a business success partner is to work with business owners to increase their profit growth and their business value. And somebody has to get in there and they have to tear this business to pieces and find those savings. That's why we're confident that we can double the profit of our clients' businesses in the first 12 months of working with them. You know, in all the corporates that I've been to, I've never seen an office door that's got James Smith, manager of profit growth and business value. That isn't the job. They don't do that. It tends to be broken down and spread amongst all of the executives, but the upshot is that nobody does it. So when we go in as business success partners, that's one of the first things the first things that we do, or one of the many things that we do. But if we're making a promise, the best to our ability to double their profit in 12 months, which is a pretty compelling proposition, then this is some of the methods that you'd use to do that.
David, I can't imagine you going and talking to a business owner and saying, hello, my name's Julius Bloom and I'd like to double your profits in the next 12 months. Would you like to work together? They're not going to turn that down, are they?
No, absolutely not, unless they're crazy.
They would be mad. So pay very careful attention to what we've just said and go listen to it again perhaps, because there's some real value nuggets in there, and it's actually quite simple in most businesses to double your profit within 12 months. It sounds like a pretty big goal and very audacious, but it's not. It's absolutely achievable. Thank you for listening. Everything Business Consulting is brought to you by ConsultX, a global business consulting community that gives you everything you require to take control of your lifestyle and income by becoming a successful business consultant. ConsultX guides you through the entire process of building and running your own consulting business with a complete online academy, a system to acquire clients, a framework and software to provide them with real results, an international community of like-minded individuals, and a suite of resources and much more. To find out more about this opportunity, visit ConsultX.com. That's ConsultX.com.